Hello guys, my name is Alex from Lenspo and I welcome you to my YouTube channel. This channel is all about helping beginners as I am into the filmmaking world to make your life easier. When I was just starting out, there was a lot of information dumping on me from all the corners of YouTube, internet, different forums, that I need to do this and I need to do that, and I was completely lost in all of this. Today I know a little bit more about filmmaking, so I'd like to share my experience and what I found the most important for myself when you're just starting out into the filmmaker's journey. I'm going to split this information into a few different videos, not to overwhelm you with all the information and help you to remember this information better. Today's video will be all about choosing your gear when you're just starting out. First thing that comes to our mind when we are choosing a gear is buying a camera. But actually, to make all of this easier, I will use myself as an example, what I would have done with all the information I have now. So if I was about to start in a filmmaking journey now, I would first consider what I will be shooting, like to define the purpose of my camera, what my camera will be used for, whether it will be using commercials, using some client works, maybe some real estate interviews, maybe some nature shooting, because depending on this you will be choosing your camera and your camera specs according to what you will be actually shooting. For me personally, I'm very inspired by Daniel Schiffer and Peter McKinnon, both amazing YouTubers, but most importantly they make amazing slow motion videos. And this is why the most important spec in the camera for me will be frames per second. So how much frames per second this camera allows me to shoot. Frame rate is basically, in easy words, it's how much you will be able to slow down your video in the post-production in your editing software. For me, it will be 100 frames per second. I'm talking in European terms now. If you're, for example, somewhere else or in the US, in Canada, it will be 120 frames per second for you. For me, it's 100 frames per second. So this is the minimum requirement for the camera I will be choosing personally for my purpose. Back then I was choosing between two cameras and I was so undecided which one to choose, because one allowed me to shoot in 100 frames per second, the other one in 50 frames per second. What 100 frames per second means is that I can slow down my footage 4 times, 50 frames per second equally 2 times. So only half of its speed. And I was watching the video of Peter McKinnon's, who said that you can do well with 60 frames per second. I bought a camera with only 60 frames per second, and I must tell you that of course you can move slower, you can shoot steadier, but in the end of the day, if you have a flying objects, like for example in Daniel Schiffer's commercials, you cannot change the rules of gravitation. So 100 or 120 frames per second is a must-have if you enjoy slow motion footage as I am. The very next thing to consider is your camera resolution. Nowadays, almost every YouTube creator leans toward 4K footage simply because it's better. And believe me when I say that your camera needs to have 4K in 2021. And if someone else says that it doesn't matter, you will not see the difference, believe me, you will see it in post-production, you will see it on your phone, you will see it wherever you're watching the videos, the quality will be simply better. Unfortunately, those cameras which allow us to shoot in 4K and let's say 100 frames per second are very expensive at the moment. So what I did, I bought a camera which allows me to shoot Full HD 100 frames per second for OK quality for slow motion videos, and then it also has a possibility to shoot in 4K 25 frames per second. Why everyone says 25 or 24 frames per second? It's a cinema standard for most naturally looking motion blur. So remember, Full HD 100 frames per second, 4K 25, it's a minimum requirement if you are like me. And the third thing you need to know about the camera specs is the codec in which your camera shoots. For example, my camera is shooting only in 8-bit codec. To be honest, I would rather buy a camera which shoots in 10-bit codec, because the difference between 8-bit and 10-bit is huge. For example, 8-bit codec can recognize over 16 million colors. 10-bit codec can recognize over 1 billion colors. Can you understand this huge difference? It gives you so much more room to play with colors in editing software in the post-production. And believe me when I say, like, 8-bit is still okay, you can survive it with, and I'm getting paid clients with this camera. But if you have a possibility to buy 10-bit camera codec, go for it, you will not regret. Now, when I'm finished with understanding camera specs and what I need, instead of going and buying a camera according to those specs, there are actually a few things to consider first. You need additional gear to shoot your footage. First, you need lights, you need gimbal, and you need a microphone. And I don't even count down anything else that you need all around your videos, such as tripods, stands, additional green screens and stuff like this. Those are three mains: lights, microphone and gimbal. When it comes to lights, even cheap lights are better than no lights at all. There are a lot of cheap studio lights on Amazon, you can go and check it for yourself. You can also check link here where I compare cheap lights for you. Also, you need to know that the light quality is very important, and it defines by how much the light source is close to daily light. For example, I'm shooting on Aperture 120D Mark II with a Light Dome Mark II, and the light source is very close to daily light. That's why Aperture lights are so good, and they are so, like, for me they are very expensive, let's say. But actually Aperture 120D is like the entry point for professional lights, so you can check this out in the link right here. At the moment I know of two international companies which make amazing quality lights, and this is Aperture and Manlight Global. You can check both of them, you cannot go wrong with either. The next thing we need to buy is a gimbal, and there are a few things which I can tell you about choosing a gimbal. First and foremost, I highly recommend you to buy a gimbal which has this type of handle here, so you can mount your camera and then you have a better low angle shooting capabilities. Because if you don't have this handle, then you would need to crouch, you would need to bend, and this is not good. Believe me, it's not good for your back and it's not good for you generally, because you will simply get it better if you choose handle like this. The next thing is that try to buy a gimbal which has this wheel for manual focusing, because when you're going to get more professional, you will understand that actually manual focus in many situations is better than an automatic focus. And this wheel which will allow you to mount manual focus ring on your camera, and you will be able to do both. You don't need a third person who will manually focus the camera for you. And the last thing, but it's not important and it's not necessary, my gimbal allows me to shoot my videos like this with a 360 rotation angle. This is just something which you can use, it's not necessary, but it's great to have. It gives you completely different feeling from your footage. I don't use it that much, but there are some situations when I'd like to. And by the way, I'm using Zhiyun Weebill S, and I highly recommend this one because it powers for approximately 10 to 12 hours. It can power your camera and it has everything I just mentioned. Next topic we are going to talk about is microphones. There are a lot of different types of microphones. I'm not a tech savvy, so I will not be able to explain you everything in details. I will link a video down below for a great video from full-time filmmaker team. They explain it better. As for me, I'm using Rode Wireless Go second generation because it has two microphones, so whenever I'm shooting interviews I can record both people at the same time simultaneously. And besides, I can go how much I want away from my camera and you will still be able to hear me. I don't need to speak directly to the camera. Whenever we are using, for example, shotgun mics, they're directional mics, so it means that you need to speak directly into these microphones because they isolate everything which comes from the side. And I like those better with the lavalier mic, just simply because I can turn in every direction, I can talk directly to the camera, or I can do something else, and I will still capture great voice recording. Yeah. So this is what you need to know regarding microphones. This microphone is not that cheap, but it worth the price. Now that I know how much money I'm left with after choosing my side gear, I can finally go and check my camera out. But first, there are still few things that you need to understand. There are full frame cameras and there are cropped sensor cameras. Cropped sensor cameras are usually cheaper, they are more affordable, their lenses more affordable, but they still provide you with a great quality and they allow you to shoot for the clients, paid jobs. I was shooting everything on this camera, which I'm shooting right now. It's Sony a6400 with a crop sensor and I'm very happy with it. The only thing I'm missing from here is like 10-bit codec, 100 frames per second in 4K. Okay, there are quite a few things I'm missing from it, but still it's a great quality for such an inexpensive camera. Then there are full frame cameras. Full frame cameras are usually more expensive, they provide you with a better quality, better depth of field, shallow depth of field, blurry background, and then their lenses cost a lot. Their lenses cost actually a fortune. My first camera was Canon EOS RP with a full frame sensor, and those RF mount lenses, oh my gosh, those cost a fortune. I would need to sell a liver to buy one of those. Really very expensive. That's why I ended up returning my Canon EOS RP, because simply it didn't have 100 frames per second and lenses, I cannot afford those. So for buying Canon EOS RP and one lens to the camera, I returned them and I bought Sony a6400 for the Black Friday, two lenses and an SD card for the same amount of money. This is a huge difference and this is what you really need to consider when you're buying one of those. As well as you need to consider how much SD cards would cost you, because different cameras need different amount of money to be invested in them. For example, Sony a7S III records in such quality footage that you really need SD card, which for example will cost you $500 US. So whenever you're choosing a camera, check how much lenses that you need will cost you, how much SD cards will cost you, and all the stuff around your camera. This is not that simple, this is not a simple decision. Sometimes we need to cut off, we need to make sacrifices, we need to come to some agreements with ourselves. In the end of the day, I bought my Sony a6400 and I'm really happy with it. It provides me with job, it provides me with money, it provides me with everything I need from the camera. And I will switch it in the future for sure, but as a beginner, it's a great camera, I highly recommend it. And the last thing you would need for a camera is an ND filter. ND filter is like a sunglasses for a camera to protect your lens in the bright sunlight, otherwise you won't be able to see anything and you won't be able to keep this cinema standard motion blur. Here you can check the video I made, top 3 things in my opinion when you are choosing an ND filter. It will help you out. And the last thing I'd like to tell you, even if you cannot afford the camera of your choosing, you can still check what type of lenses this camera uses, and maybe you can buy a cheaper body which uses the same lens mounts, and then whenever you are ready to switch from that body to the newer body, you don't have to sell everything, you can still use the lenses you are already invested in. As for me now, I'm considering switching from Sony a6400 to another camera, which is Blackmagic 6K Pro, and it uses EF lens mount, so it will be quite an expensive switch. The further I go, the more interesting the road gets, the more clients I get, the more interesting job becomes. So that's it for today's video, guys. I hope it's not too overwhelming. I hope this information will help you choosing your gear and understanding how you can actually get into the filmmaking world, what aspects do we need to pay attention to, and then I will gladly see you in the next one. If it's not too much to ask, please leave a like, comment down below, and maybe consider subscribing to my channel for more upcoming content like this, and I will see you in the next one.